Hello everybody, what is up? Crowbar Wargaming here, back with another painted 1914 review. It's been a while since we've been doing one of these, but I want to get back to doing them weekly. So here we are again, and now we have the Austro-Hungarian army. This is one of my favorites. They were one of the first factions that I painted up, and I really love the box art. You know, they just have such an interesting flag. So yeah, definitely something I really like about them. But let's get into the actual pieces. Now, starting off, I want to go with their infantry. I recently painted up a lot of extra infantry after my last game you may have seen, where we didn't have enough. So you can see we've got a ton of awesome new looking guys. So with these new guys, I just went with this kind of dark blue pattern. Here we see this kind of crazy looking flag. This is the Austrian Royal Standard battle flag. So we got that guy. I try to make every single power that we have in my game have a battle flag guy, so that's him. Here we have a nice officer class dude. Very nice. These are, the guys I'm showing you right now are all from a French Zuhoves set from the Crimean War, but they make really good, as you can see with this guy here, he is a Muslim troop. So, as you know, Austria-Hungary had a ton of different nationalities. So, the Muslim troops that came mostly from around places in Serbia and Bosnia were equipped with their own uniforms that usually changed up with the addition of a fez. So then, we do have some other variations. So, this guy is a South African Austrian soldier. Now, Austria didn't really have any soldiers in South Africa. As you know, they didn't have any African colonies, but they did have a decent amount of actual Austro-Hungarians that had moved to German South Africa and that were in the German army. So I just decided to paint one up. I thought it'd be cool maybe to add a militia down there to help out the Germans defend. Here we have a Austrian that is equipped for fighting in Turkey. So you can see he has a late war uniform on. And this was a part of the, this uniform is a part of the pattern of the guys that were sent over to the Ottoman Empire to help out. So, I like that guy. And then this guy here is the last kind of variation of uniform that I painted, where this is a Asian service uniform. So, this is the kind of guy that, now again, the Austrians didn't have a lot of colonies, but they did have one in in Austrian Tianjin, which was a city in China. They had a marine detachment of about 400 men there. And they also had a few men from a cruiser that was serving in German Tsingtao during the siege of Tsingtao. So we've got that guy to represent those East Asian uniforms. And then just to show off a few more, we've got another one of the Muslim troops. Very nice. And then as the standard guys, I did make a video a while back, but these guys are kind of simplistic. They are actually Confederate soldiers from a Civil War box. So they're the only major difference that I could see was the fact that their kepes, the Austrians their Austrian caps pointed the other direction, so they had more of like a peak to them instead of this one where it slouches down. But when it's on the board, they all look great, you know, and they don't, you know, people aren't going to point out like, oh, this is definitely a Confederate or a Union uniform from the Civil War. So, yeah, and we've got a bunch more, but I think we'll save those. You'll see them in future games and such. So yeah, let's get into some of the cooler units. We got the land units. Now, of course, the siege artillery with a nice little, what's it called, decal. Sorry, it's pretty early morning, so I'm a little off, but yeah. Finally got some time again because of the fact that, you know, as you know, in college we have lots of tests and finals, so I've not been able to make a lot of YouTube videos recently. Here is the heavy tank. A very cool looking unit, very different. You've probably seen this in the Ottoman Empire heavy tank video, or painted video, where I show off these things. And yeah, they're basically, I think they're from like Warhammer, but I 3D printed them and they just kind of look the part of like some weird experimental 1914 heavy tank, you know, like This track pattern was used on, I think, like the British Mark 9 or Mark 10 troop carrier. So I could see maybe like the Austrians captured one and put a giant howitzer on it. Here's just another one. Here we actually have an Austro-Hungarian tank. This was built in, I think, the 1913s or 1914s. And it was the Bursten tank. I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but a very cool looking tank, very modern in the sense of, having a fighting compartment, a turret. So a very cool and interesting looking design. But like some of the other nations that had design tanks, I know Austria was one of them with this one, and the Russians were the other country that had actually experimented and were on the Austrians actually got a prototype out. The Russians, on the other hand, had a lot of paper models, but they never really got around to building any because the high command just kind of deemed them to be like a useless vehicle, which, as World War I ended up showing, they definitely were not. Here we just have some artillery, just some like Dutch artillery from World War II, but use those for pretty much all my powers in this game. Let's see what else we've got here. We got a railroad gun. Another one of my 3D printed pieces that I've been using for my different nations. Here we have trains, but the problem with all these trains is the fact that after playing my last game, I thought that they would be a cool addition to have to buy trains, it'd be like a logistical purchase, but they ended up just kind of taking up space and not getting used to their fullest extent. I really like the system that historical board gaming has in their global games, where trains are just kind of invisible, but you kind of pretend they're there and you move units along railroad tracks. So I think that these trains are probably going to get phased out, which kind of blows because I've got about 10 for every army, so I may end up like selling those. So heads up to anyone that may want some train units. Here we have the armored car. This is a German armored car, just in Austrian service. There are a few units here and there that I might get in the future that are like more nation specific. Like I know the Austrians had some pretty cool looking armored cars. And then the armored train, which is the last land unit. Armored trains I'll definitely keep. They were pretty cool. Kind of having like a hard hitting unit that was connected to the rail. So kind of like the railgun, but it could transport units. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. So, getting into the Air Force, the Austrian fighters. I really like their color scheme we got here. It's like supposed to be like more of a wooden effect that I've got there, which came out kind of nicely. You can see on the fuselage there. Yeah, but we have the Austrian flag on the tips and the Iron Cross on the wings. I was a little bit scared that the Iron Cross would get confused like with German planes, but it was not the case. Yeah. So, and yeah, we got the mighty Austrian Zeppelin. I think one of these almost got built last game that we played, but Austria was kind of buckling down because the Italian invasion of their homeland happened pretty early. And then a Austrian bomber. And though this is supposed to be like a Gotha, I would just call it like a Brandenburg Saxon-Coburg bomber, because it looks the part. And yeah, that is the Air Force. And then finally, getting into the cooler units, we have the Austrian Navy. Now, they're kind of a forgotten navy in history. The fact that they were actually a very powerful fleet, especially for like a largely landlocked nation. And they had some pretty cool ships, and you can see with this really weird color scheme here, it's actually a fairly realistic color scheme. It was back, they didn't have this by 1914. I think by 1914 the ships were either green or gray, but in 1910 this was the standard Austrian naval camouflage pattern, where you had a dark green ship, these light brown decks, and then a pink waterline. So definitely pretty cool and pretty wacky, but it's certainly sets them apart from other nations. So yeah, I went with a what's it called, like a gloss finish or a silver dry brush on these things. So it kind of, they don't look great up close like most 3D printed units, but when they're down on the board, I think they look pretty all right. But yeah, these ships I spent a lot of time designing. And yeah, I really like the Radzentki class battleship. They were some of my favorites, just because of the fact that, like, you look at that turret pattern there, and I really like it with, like, the the 6 turrets kind of, like, all spread out in this, like, this pattern, or ovoid pattern, and then also with the big deck in the middle that they had a bunch of landing ships on. So a very cool looking ship. And as some of you may know if you've watched my 1914 game, the Austrians built like a ton of units. I was the German player, and I was telling them build like a naval unit every turn just to keep the Allies occupied in the Mediterranean. Here we have the Austrian pre-dreadnought. This is I forget the name of it, but this is actually like an Austrian pre-dreadnought, not some other nations. And another ship I really like, just because of the fact that, for one, it had kind of like a weird teardrop shape where this broader edge was actually the leading edge of the ship. And then also you can see it's got this like almost like sailing ship configuration where you've got 3 decks of sponsons on the sides of this thing. So I would not want to get into a close quarters duel with one of these. And then you get a lot of air intakes on top too, which is another kind of cool feature. Some other units, we've got the destroyer. If you guys have been watching this series, the destroyers are similar for all the nations. Let's see. We have transport. This is, I think, an Allied transport from the 1941 games, but they make an alright unit. We have the submarine. This is the only ship that kind of diverges from the standard pattern. They have a blue deck, and that was another kind of thing that the Austrians had done, where their subs were blue on top. And that was basically because they were operating in the Adriatic, which was a lot shallower and a lot more blue water than most navies that had largely ocean-going submarines. Here we have the Monitor, and now you may have seen this Monitor before in some of my other videos, and this is actually an Austro-Hungarian Monitor, so actually in service now with my Austro-Hungarian army. And again, I forget the name of it, but this is a pretty famous ship. You can actually see this on display. It's a museum ship in Hungary. But it is a very cool Monitor. They had a huge service history even before World War I, going back all the way into the Balkan Wars and bombarding Ottoman fortifications, and yeah, definitely a really cool looking Monitor. And lastly, in here we have got, if I can find it, let's see, the cruisers. And again, the same cruisers for all my central powered nations. I think these are just World War II De Ruyter class Dutch cruisers, but you know, they look pretty good. And yeah, so, and the Austrians do get one of these off the coast of Tsing Sao. So I remember in the last game, it didn't meet it met a fateful end when the Russians came in and blew that out of the water. But overall, I hope you guys enjoyed my Austro-Hungarian video, and comment down below on what you would want to see next, because I've got pretty much all my nations painted up, and the last few ones are coming out the door. You can see here we have the Confederacy. Now this is from a alternate history game, or an alternate history setup that you'll be able to play on my 1914 map. But yeah, again, if you like this video, comment down below. We are now at 300 subscribers, so if you're new to the channel and you like the content, then consider subscribing. And I hope to see you guys again. Cobra out.